Hello again, friends. Welcome to Gamecock Central Radio. Emerson Phillips with Wes Mitchell for a football recruiting update today. Wes, good to have you again. How you doing today?
Good, man. Ready to sort of close this thing out. Obviously, a lot of storylines heading into National Signing Day. Busy times for the coaches, busy time for Gamecock Central, but I think we got plenty of good content for our members to enjoy.
We do indeed. Today's Friday, January the 27th, and that means we have reached the last weekend of official on-campus visits for this 2017 signing period, which comes up Wednesday. February the 1st will be National Signing Day, Wes, so it's the last chance for the Gamecocks to have on-campus visitors to welcome in recruits that they've been working on, in some cases for a couple of years, and last chance to make an impression before kids sign on the dotted line on Wednesday. So let's talk about the group coming in this weekend, Wes.
Yeah, you got a group of guys coming in, most of them that are not committed to South Carolina. You do have one commitment in Zay Brown, but the rest of the guys are kids that South Carolina is trying to, get to come to South Carolina. I guess Jamias Williams technically still on the commitment list as well. But as we know, he's sort of coming down to a final decision on National Signing Day. So I think you sort of consider him a target as well this weekend. They'll look to lock him down. Of course, they'll look to lock down Javon Kinlaw, who was also at one time a committed prospect. Aaron Sterling, the 4-star defensive lineman from Tucker, Georgia. Jordan Carty, the high 3-star offensive tackle from Hollywood, Florida. And then, of course, the intriguing name that a lot of people are talking about is 4-star defensive end Robert Beal, who is a 4-star guy, originally from Peachtree Ridge High School in Sewanee, Georgia. Spent this past season at IMG down in Bradenton. Committed to the Bulldogs, but we'll see if South Carolina can make a little run at him this weekend.
Any advantage at all, Wes, for the Gamecocks getting Beal on campus for the last weekend of official visits?
Well, I think, we all know in recruiting that anything can happen. And I think that you look at sort of the opportunity to sort of be the last word. Now, obviously, these coaches are, I think people get a little confused sometimes because a dead period starts after Sunday, and people consider a dead period to mean that the coaches can't talk to the kids. Well, that's not true. They can still talk to them on the phone. So, that doesn't mean you necessarily get the absolute last word, but you do get the last in-person impression. So, I think that always helps. I think it's a situation where with Bill, you don't really have anything to lose. I mean, most people expect him to sign with Georgia where he's committed. But, hey, at the same time, I think South Carolina has an opportunity to make this thing at least interesting and make Georgia sweat a little bit. He had a visit to South Carolina this summer that actually went very well. Wasn't really very highly publicized for whatever reason, but we reported about it on the site. Had a good time. Has a good relationship with Travaris Robinson, T-Rob. So I mean, I don't think that South Carolina is a complete and total long shot. I think he probably ends up at Georgia, but at the same time, I think they've got a puncher's chance here to make an impression. And certainly, I think we all know they need pass rush, so they're going to be able to sell him on playing that buck position, sell him on getting on the field early, and it won't just be a recruiting pitch; it'll be the absolute truth. So they got a good story to sell there.
Wes, Beal has been a Georgia commit for some time now, but it really feels like to me the closer we get to signing day, maybe the Gamecocks are in it with Robert Beal. And he may still honor that Georgia commitment. We don't know at this point, but it feels to me like the Gamecocks still have a shot to land him.
Yeah, I think they do. And, it's kind of, every year the class and sort of the recruiting cycle sort of takes on, you sort of find a storyline for that recruiting cycle, and you never quite know how it's gonna, it sort of takes on a life of its own. And strangely, this has very much become a South Carolina versus Georgia type, finish to the class at least. So you have, in a lot of, a lot of these battles, it's kind of to the point where it's sort of down to a 2-team race. Sometimes kids have 4 or 5 hats on the table, but interestingly enough, this year for basically, as I'm thinking about it, about all the remaining targets, it's down to like South Carolina and another school, with Robert Bill, obviously, South Carolina, Georgia. With Jamias Williams, it's South Carolina, Georgia. With Devontae Wyatt, who, we've talked about before, has already taken his visit, South Carolina, Georgia. Aaron Sterling, 4-star defensive lineman that'll be in this weekend, it's South Carolina, Tennessee. So you're talking about another SEC East rival. Brad Johnson, who's already taken all of his officials, it's South Carolina, Virginia Tech. So all these recruitments are sort of, you can really tell that they're into their final stages, and that these kids have sort of narrowed it all the way down, and they're literally, a lot of them sort of weighing the pros and cons of two particular programs.
Wes, let's talk more about Jamias Williams, high-profile defensive back, and he and Hamza Nasruddin were, two of the centerpieces of what folks figured would be part of the 2017 Gamecock football signing class. But Nasruddin flipped to Florida State last weekend. How much more important does that make the signing of Jamias Williams for Gamecock football?
Well, I think only from a perception standpoint does it. The kid is a great player. I think at the same time, if you're South Carolina, you miss out on him. This is still very much a rebuilding process for South Carolina, where they're going to have to stack recruiting classes on top of recruiting classes, and everybody misses on guys from time to time, and everybody has decommitment. So it would be bad for South Carolina, obviously, but it just means that that's another spot where they have to continue to add talent. I think long term with Muschamp and T-Rob, we know they're going to build a secondary. That's what they do. Everywhere they go, they build top secondary. So I think losing Jamias Williams, losing Hamza Nasruddin, or losing Jamias Williams, if that happens, I should say. They obviously did lose Nasruddin. Just from a perception standpoint, it hurts, and it just maybe delays the process a little bit. And obviously, this day and age, you want to win as quickly as possible, but I think we all know this is going to take time to rebuild this roster. So it would hurt South Carolina. It would mean a lot of time, a lot of recruiting effort will have gone to waste. But at the end of the day, there's only so much a staff can do. They're doing everything they possibly can to keep Jamias Williams in the fold. I personally believe they hold on to him. I think Georgia gave him a little bit to think about, but South Carolina still has their official visit. They'll try to answer any lingering questions this weekend, make sure all that's taken care of. I lean towards them hanging on to Jamias Williams in the end.
Gamecock Central Radio recruiting update today with Wes Mitchell. I'm Emerson Phillips. We invite you to download the Gamecock Central Radio app. We've got this free phone app that allows you to listen to our podcast for free anywhere you receive cell phone service. You can listen on your phone, and you can get the GCR Radio app on the App Store and on Google Play. To subscribe to our podcast, search for Gamecock Central Radio on iTunes, SoundCloud, and other popular services, or just visit radio.GamecockCentral.com. So, Wes, Gamecocks and Bulldogs battling for 3 prospects, and one of those is Devontae Wyatt. He has been a Georgia commit, but the Gamecocks are still in contention for him, we believe. He visited last weekend. What's up with Wyatt, Wes?
Well, Wyatt's a guy that, has actually been committed to South Carolina at one point, committed to Georgia now. Will take his visit to Florida this weekend. Visited South Carolina 2 weekends ago, visited Georgia this past weekend. This is a kid that I think is truly torn. Despite his Georgia commitment, obviously there's always a bit of Georgia pressure to stay at home, and, we'll see if he can withstand that. Is on the record saying that his South Carolina official went better than the Georgia official. Does that win out in the end? Does the relationship with Lance Thompson win out in the end? We don't know yet, but I think this is a kid that is truly back and forth, truly trying to decide, what direction to go. So I think because of the sort of fact that he is so torn, it's very, very hard to predict what he's going to do. But I do think, despite that Georgia commitment, that South Carolina is very, very much in it. I don't so much think that Florida is really a factor here, but I think between South Carolina and Georgia, still very, very close with Devontae Wyatt.
Wes, we've talked about the Gamecocks' needs to improve up front on both sides of the football, and you mentioned Sterling earlier in today's podcast. How much can Wyatt and Sterling possibly help the Gamecocks on the defensive line if they're able to land one or both of them?
Well, yeah, I think, on the line, you're not really looking at, especially in the interior line. I don't know that Wyatt's necessarily a guy that just comes in and plays right away as far as, being an instant impact, but I think athletically, you look at upgrading your front four, then Wyatt does that immediately. This is a kid that plays some running back in high school, and plays it well, as a massive kid. So, he certainly upgrades the athleticism. Now, Sterling, on the other hand, I think he's a guy that gets him on campus. And I think he's coming into the visit. I think he's a South Carolina lean. This is a guy that I think instantly probably sees the field next year, at the very least as a pass rush specialist type, which clearly is something they need. He's already, he could grow into a defensive tackle long term, but he's already got size to play defensive end. Currently, he's already 260 pounds, about 6'2", 6'2.5". I think he steps on the field immediately if they can get him. It's sort of been no secret that he's been a South Carolina lean for a while. I think Tennessee did a good job this past weekend. They gave him something to think about, at least sort of an alternative thought process. Of course, South Carolina this weekend will try to make sure they can, handle any lingering doubt there, if there is any, and knock him out. So, I think they should be in pretty good shape with Sterling after this weekend.
Another defensive player, another pass rush specialist that the Gamecocks have been working on for quite some time now is in-state prospect Brad Johnson from Pendleton High School. Wes, he's down to South Carolina and Virginia Tech. And, to me, this is an important kid for South Carolina just because of the fact that Muschamp and the staff have spent a lot of time working on this fella. This is a Shrine Bowl prospect, Shrine Bowl player from Pendleton High, one of the top players in South Carolina, and the Gamecocks have made a very concerted effort to go after Brad Johnson.
Yeah, he was easily one of the best players the Shrine Bowl week, on either team. Disruptive force as a pass rusher. Has clearly been, I guess the word of the day is probably torn. Truly torn between South Carolina and Virginia Tech. South Carolina's made him a priority. I think at the same time, give a ton of credit to Virginia Tech. They've done a great job recruiting and putting that doubt in his mind about just taking the sort of obvious route and going to South Carolina. So, he's looking at a signing day decision. He met with Will Muschamp earlier this week. He met with Virginia Tech coaches as well. So, I think that one is sort of a 55-45 or a 60-40 split right now. Give the edge to the Gamecocks because of in-state. Personally, I'm still a little bit, I don't know what the word is. I would say a little bit iffy about saying South Carolina is definitely getting him because he hasn't committed yet. And it's been so long, and he's been sort of considered a South Carolina lean for so long. It just makes you wonder, what is he waiting on? So I think that speaks to the fact that he's truly still a little bit torn, and, we'll see where it goes from there. But, I think a slight edge for South Carolina, but really Virginia Tech wouldn't surprise me a bit.
It's going to come down to the last hour for a number of these prospects that we've talked about today and others. Wes, best guess right now, how many prospects do you think the Gamecocks will sign on Wednesday?
25. I think 25 on the dot.
5 days until National Signing Day. Kind of a nervous time, I guess, for coaches. They put a lot of time and effort into working on some of these players, and they're going to find out here in the next few days exactly who will be part of the Gamecock 2017 signing class. So it's an exciting time, Wes. We talk about it all the time. Recruiting is the lifeblood of every program, and the Gamecocks with a new coaching staff that just finished up its first year here. And, Muschamp has laid the foundation for recruiting success, Wes, and I don't think anybody in the business works harder than South Carolina staff right now.
Oh, yeah, they're getting after it and already getting out to these 2018 kids. They'll have some juniors on campus on Saturday, and we're going to run some more information on the juniors, on some top juniors they're targeting here later on Friday when we're recording this. So the thing about recruiting is it really never stops. This 2017 class is really their first full cycle, and 2018 cycle will really be the first time. You know how early recruiting starts now. will sort of be the first cycle that they'll have a full cycle plus, to build those relationships, to get out early offers, and to sort of go from there. So, I think this class, they sort of scrambled, put together a class like they could, the best they could. Last class, the 2017 bunch, to me, is sort of the first group that has sort of just bought into South Carolina's vision and this cultural change that they're trying to produce, and has just bought into the grand plan here at South Carolina. So, I think you sort of, certainly this last class, 2016, is a class that has sort of produced a foundation of talent, but I think we look at 2017 also as being one that we may look back on and say this is the group that sort of started believing before all the wins were in place.
Stay with us here on Gamecock Central for full recruiting coverage next week. National Signing Day coming up on Wednesday. Wes, I know you and Chris Clark will be swamped next week. What can we look forward to here on Gamecock Central?
Hope that people are checking out our What We're Hearing features we've been doing. We're going to continue those. It basically gives the very latest inside information on any particular prospect at that given time, very easily accessible. If you just go click What We're Hearing on, whichever prospect you want, you can see it right there on Gamecock Central. And I think we've got those for just about every single final target heading into this weekend's final official visit. So hopefully people are checking those out. And the great thing about our message boards is if people have questions, they can get on there and ask us as well. So plenty of content this weekend, obviously plenty of content on National Signing Day. A ton of National Signing Day coverage. Hope everybody will check us out. Actually, you know what? We've got a 14-day free trial going on right now as well. So that means if you're not a member, you sign up for that 14-day free trial right now, you can actually get all of our signing day coverage for absolutely free. So if you go on the site right now, there is a promotional code. And if you look on the front page, you can actually see the link there, and it automatically puts the code in there for them. But otherwise, if they just go on the site and click subscribe, then try to pull up the code here for them. It is free NSD for National Signing Day. So if they go put in free NSD for National Signing Day and the promotional code spot, then they'll get 14 days free trial with no charge at all.
Great time to take advantage of that with National Signing Day coming up on Wednesday. Up-to-the-minute recruiting information from Gamecock Central, and in an interactive format. You can interact with Wes Mitchell, with Chris Clark, and other staff members from Gamecock Central by joining as a premium member. Wes, we appreciate the update today, man. Looking forward to talking more with you next week. I know you're going to be packed next week with radio and writing for the site, but we look forward to getting with you again here on Gamecock Central Radio and talking more Gamecock football recruiting. Thanks very much.
Absolutely, Emerson. Appreciate it, man. We'll talk to everybody soon.
All right. Thank you, Wes. He's Wes Mitchell, and I'm Emerson Phillips. We'll be back to talk more Gamecock recruiting next week here on Gamecock Central Radio. Thanks for joining us.